So to continue with this exploration of some of the distinctive elements of early Tantra, some of which survive into later Tantra as well. The second one I talked about, I promised would be the ritual of opening the mouth of a corpse, especially in the smashana, the cremation ground, which meaning it could be the place where they actually cremate it, but I think it's more likely an enclosure where the corpse is stored overnight before cremation in the daylight. And that gives the opportunity for the practitioners, if you like, to make use of the corpse for magical ritual. And apparently this still goes on in the modern world. And, you know, I suppose it's an opportunity. So many aspects of death and what's it, a kind of, you know, something you have to go through but don't have any use. But I suppose it might be some sort of consolation to people to feel that they've helped somebody else, that their passing, their corpse, has some final use, and it might help with the cost of the funeral and stuff like that. But certainly, all right, you might say that these practitioners, you might think of them as dodgy or whatever, who want to engage in this particularly taboo or scary ritual, and they will pay someone to make use of the corpse in the night before the cremation. There's quite a lot of folklore as well, and stories about all of this sort of stuff, and fantastic stuff. And so the corpse then will be taken, will go missing for a few hours overnight, and will be used by a practitioner to be reanimated in order that they can communicate. So the goddess, in a sense, the Shakti, that one of these yoginis can be installed into the corpse and can give knowledge in one way or another. But it's quite a heavy-duty, terrifying ritual in lots of ways, and often, as it happens, so it's reported in some of the literature that when the corpse is returned, the head actually might have been removed. You get the head back, but there's some indication that it has probably been decapitated in the course of the ritual, because, as I say, the offering of a severed head of a corpse is a very acceptable offering, either in some symbolic way to these supernatural entities known as the yoginis, who might be real witches or might be kind of discarnate entities in one form or another. And if you think about it, if you look in the Hindu temple, there's a kind of echo of this, that one of the most common offerings in Orthodox Hindu shrines is a coconut, and a coconut sort of can look a bit like a kind of head, right, in one form or another. And I think that's not coincidental why they're so popular. So it's the most spectacular type of ritual, the offering of homa into the mouth of an uncorrupted corpse. It hasn't been around too long. Often in order to take hold of its tongue. Again, these are the very even more taboo details in a way, which then the tongue itself, see, nobody ever checks whether the tongue is missing. The head might come back, but is the tongue missing? The tongue can be treated in some symbolic way as a magical weapon, which I give you a think about it. A tongue is a magical weapon, isn't it? It enables us to make these strange speeches and magical word, the tongue. So it can be turned into, in this early Tantra, was supposed to be a magical weapon, or to reanimate the corpse. And there are these stories about these entities called Vetala rather, I think I wrote that wrong. Vetala, which sometimes translated as vampires. Sort of, again, undead entities that can do the practitioner's bidding and go and get other magical objects for him, usually tongues in one way or another. There's a whole book about this, apparently, which surveys all the different sources, some of which are fiction and some of which seem to be based on people's testimonies. And we can observe that simply that the offering of oblations into a fire, it have to be offered into a fire, but in this case, the fire is in the mouth of the corpse. And that seems to be mentioned several times in these tantric sources where the practice must have originated. So it's certainly in the older text. It's not a new innovation. It's sort of thing that might have died out, if anything. And done in a different way. And as I say, I suggest you compare that to the ritual of opening the mouth, which is a vital ancient Egyptian funeral rite performed on all sorts of things, mummies and statues and anything, in which one symbolically restores the dead person's senses, so not just one sense, all 5 senses, so that they can breathe, speak, eat, and see in the afterlife. And doing that, they can also then give you messages about what they see. They can act as a kind of mediator between you and the other part. And this is performed by priests and members of the family in secret, I suppose, or in not secret, but in private. Using special tools, including this ads I mentioned, this kind of little tool shaped like the constellation Ursa Major, which is used to open the mouth of Osiris. This has also got some sort of astronomical thing, and it ensured that what we would call the soul. Egyptians had various names for what we call the soul, one of which is the Ka, sometimes said to be the double, although the exact translation of these things is difficult. It's best just to call it the Ka, work out in practice what that might. But so they can survive, basically. The Ka, some part of the person can survive either eternally or certainly for a long time. Usually, I would say the way they resolved it in the Hindu tradition was it survives in one place in the cosmos, and eventually is reborn into another person or a creature of some sort. So that's and re-enters the biological world through reproduction. So all these different things make this kind of quite common sense, or maybe it's uncommon sense view of things. One difference might be the intention. Egypt to revive the corpse. The idea is it revives in order to it can transform to the afterlife or the other world in some way. In Tantra, the idea of this corpse ritual is to install the goddess, the great goddess, into the corpse. Again, there's an amazing parallel with the Egyptian one, because the goddess Nuit is very much connected with the corpse. She wraps it up. And also the deceased seeks to return to her womb. The coffin is a kind of symbolic womb in which they can return through a watery ritual, the waters of return to the goddess. knew it, the star goddess, or Nut, if you like. So there is there's still parallel. Maybe these things are just universal. In the tantric one, it's sort of more that it helps the magician, the practitioner, in their quest, and may not benefit the deceased in any way. I suppose that is a notable thing. But then you could say who is benefiting in the Egyptian ritual really is the living relatives who perform these rituals and get these messages with the other world. So it's unclear if it's only for the benefit of the deceased, or the deceased is acting or being used for the benefit of the living. And of course, many of the rituals in the Egyptian tradition are said to be beneficial for the living and the dead, for both people have got an interest. Although, as I say, the relatives, though, of the deceased may well regard this as an honour to the family, that their loved ones has been thought suitable to play this useful role in a very secret ritual that doesn't really interrupt the process of them being, cremated and reborn in the other way. It may actually help them. And as I say, that it may not be really possible to make a distinction between all these different aims and all the rest. It's just what people do. The revival of the corpse involved an element of, in the Egyptian tradition, of becoming Osiris in some way, becoming divine, and also of communicating from the other world things that those left behind need to know. So that's a little bit about the magic of the corpse. And the final bit for the recording, although a lot more in the book about all of these subjects and some of the other ones in more details too. We'll finally look a little bit at the famous body and image magic of Tantra, body magic and body and image magic of Egyptian religion as well, and the surprising parallels that exist. In this final section of the material on Tantra and Egypt presented for Northern Occult Conference, I wanted to scratch the surface on another big feature of Tantra, which is a huge topic really, of body image magic, especially in relation to the early Tantra, how it got going. And the first thing I wanted to remind you of is a quote that I read out in the first one about how sex and reproduction are the primary model here in both systems. No doubt in lots of other systems as well. But as we're comparing Tantra in India with kind of body magic in Egypt, there's certainly sex and reproduction are always a feature very bigly in these traditions, and that's why I use the image of the mysterious lady, which is taken from an elaborate book, illustrated book, painted on the walls of the tomb, in this case of Ramesses VI in the Valley of the Kings. And it could easily be, if you didn't see the hieroglyphs, a kind of one of these famous tantric images. It has that kind of look to it. Naked woman shown with primarily with these two serpents raising up on either side of the body, one to the left and one to the right, and they seem to be gendered in some versions according to the left and right. She holds in one hand a kind of image of the sun, and then another image of the sun in the other hand. All of the images, the crocodiles, the other serpents, the figures flowing in one direction, and on the other side flowing up. So there's downward flowing, upward flowing. That whole image is thought to be a representation of the inner workings of the body from an Egyptian perspective, and also sometimes called the goddess Nuit or Nut. The mystical name is Shetate, which means the mysterious one. She stands opposite a figure of Osiris, who is looking sexual, phallic, to use a technical term, separated by 3 registers and 8 other pictures. In her right hand, she holds a ram-headed god, and in her left, she holds a disc. 2 serpents with human heads rise up at the sides of the goddess. Below her right arm are all heading downwards: a scarab, a disc, a ram, and a solar-headed god. And rising on the other side of her head is a child. And then 2 arms reach up from behind the right foot of Nut and appear to seize some of these figures, grab them. So to understand all of that, this is inner mysteries, really, which isn't all in the text. But you get the idea what they might be getting at. In Kundalini Yoga, there is also this description of 3 crucial canals or serpentine tubes in the person's bodies, which are called Ida, Pingala, and Shushumna. That's fairly bread and butter stuff. It's appeared in many, many books. The weird thing to me, anyway, the revelation is that the earliest tantric texts, they mention only 2. There are 2 channels, and they have got some of these. They're called Ida and Sushumna as well. That's left and right. There is no central tube shown. And it's interesting that if you flick back to this image of the mysterious woman from Egypt, whether she be Nuit or Isis or whatever, either way, the image is a representation of the psychic body. Similar, I would say, to that of early Tantra. They're talking about the same things, and the 2 serpents to the left and to the right are connected. They're even meant to be inside the body, feminine to the left, which is the same as in Tantra, where the left-hand path is the magic of women, is the feminine side of things, which is another meaning of the term Vama, from which we get Vama Mag. I recently was reading through Nicholas Schreck's book, Demons of the Flesh, which seems to say all the right things. I'm fairly familiar with the tradition, and he points that out. What the likely meaning of left-hand implication of the term left-hand path is, not what you usually think about as sinister path and all this sort of stuff. It's only sinister if you think women are sinister. As I say, the image of the Egyptian one is from the Book of Earth, in the tomb, in the womb of the tomb. Egyptian Hindu temples also have a womb in them. You know that the Holy of Holies in an Egyptian Indian temple is actually called the womb, the Garba. So the confluence of ideas here, that the tomb chamber is also in the Egyptian famous tombs, is also a chamber of transformation. In effect, it is a womb-like structure, and it has all sorts of images and books that reinforce that idea. I say she has the ram-headed bird and the disc. And this image also occurs at a certain point in the book when rebirth is actually taking place. And sometimes that's hidden in the text because it's so, well, it is one of the most mysterious and wonderful things is the process of generation, I suppose, within the womb, or and kind of the first moments of life, which was quite simple but very, very mysterious, even now, processes and wonderful processes. So this is all about the body and its magic. This is compiled. The period, as I say, is after the composition of the Yoga Sutras. So there's also a lot about the body in that, especially there's quite a lot of continuity. The third version of that ancient text that I mentioned, the third section called Nyaya Sutra, is very, very similar to the Yoga Sutra. It even sort of alludes to things like the 8 limbs of yoga and stuff like that. But essentially, it's yoga in the sense of dealing with the alchemical body. And a more primitive or modern, whichever we want to look at, version is of the monograph known as The Serpent Power, which is a very popular book about this type of magic. It's got a very long, convoluted and difficult to understand, deliberately probably, introduction, but at the back it's got the actual text itself, which lays out some of the mysteries of the body that we're talking about. The body and the formation, the evolution, the involution of the body. And so a modern initiate, such as Vivekananda, who we mentioned earlier, might see them as intimately connected. And all of these books have come together into this. You can imagine this. These are books to remind this group of magicians some of the finer points of the techniques, really. So a few final thoughts on the tantric body magic. If I can see this, the strange thing is, I think it's clear you have to make a distinction between folk tantra and what's called grammatical tantra, which is a more philosophical, wordy type thing. They're both important, they're both quite old in their own way. The grammatical stuff is very much taken up with the play on words, the power of language, the power of the word, and the letters of the alphabet, whatever you might, or the syllabary, if you use another word, because they're not always alphabets, strictly spoken. Ultimately, it goes back to a kind of a more folk-based view of the world, although it looks so complicated you think it must be experts rather than just folky magicians like us working on this. Most people, of course, are not very familiar with the Sanskrit language or any of these. They're all quite hard languages, aren't they? Especially Sanskrit. Apart from everybody knows the sacred mantra Om. Like you got Om and you've got the Ankh. These are the two symbols, sound and symbol, that most endure from the ancient world. They're the most well-known of symbols. Occur on endless knickknacks and God knows what. People are aware that Tantra is actually based, this is the strange thing, not on that language at all, not on Sanskrit as it happens. This is a bit technical. It's actually based on an older version of the language known as the Gupta script from the Gupta age, which was a kind of a golden age coinciding with the kind of Greek and Roman period in the Near East. This was the golden age when there were immense achievements. So in science, literature, and the arts under the Chandragupta. So magic thrives at this time, in this moment of renaissance, if you like. That's when it all comes together. It's also, everybody's doing really well. It's very prosperous. There's religious freedom. Nobody's, not too much anyway, trying to kill each other. And there's this cultural advancement in literature and temple architecture. So it really is a golden age. when the earlier image I showed in one of the other films of the wheel and the lost technique of the Gupta stone carvers or metal makers as well, or perhaps another more related dynasty, the Mauryans. The reason I mentioned all that is because what you do with you have this alphabet that one of the first bits of body magic that they do is standing in the shape of the letters of this sacred alphabet. This is a feature of that literally is body magic, if you like. You put your body into the shape of the letters. And maybe that was slightly hidden before, although even that is going to be tricky because people didn't realize that they weren't using the Sanskrit alphabet. They were using an earlier alphabet, which is completely unfamiliar. So you can sort of Google that, or you can look at those shapes, which are a bit more blobby and human looking. And as we sort of mentioned before, even though there's a lot of these letters, and you can go through and you get the idea of you can have all these different shapes of body, each one for each letter of the alphabet. Plus, there are things you can do with your hands to make up some of the shapes, so you get mudras as well. So you can see how you could develop a very big sort of complex of ideas. But as we said, the text itself says you could probably just get away with just knowing one of them. The first one, if you know the first one, you got the drift, as it were. You don't really need to know every other letter, right? Because it's all there one way or another. And maybe the body just does it, and it might help with interpreting. And the first, it describes it. It describes it as a posture now, right? So there you are. We'll come back to postures, but it's a sort of gestures, more like the magical gestures and signs that you use in magic when we do things. Sometimes they call them the signs of the grades, or the one we do in the workshop is the sign of Horus fighting. In various forms, is used as a way of opening the space up. So this technique is well known. So just putting the hands against the side of the bodies and the legs together, and the body stretched up, it makes the shape of the letter A. So this is a very basic shape, the sort of, we all like standing up, hands beside body is like the default shape. And there's a version of this with the outstretched hands as well. So this is a tantric tradition, right? We're not talking about Golden Dawn or something. This is from Tantra, thousands of years, 1,500 years ago. You should know that in these Indian type languages, a sound like the first letter of the alphabet, the A sound, will have a kind of masculine and a feminine form, if you like. The one will be, so it'd be a short A and a long A, right? So again, it's like yin and yang, right? It's the similar principle, and so you've got the kind of male and female bits of the language. So the posture itself reflects that. It has the kind of male one with, and maybe the outstretched arms is the female one. That's a possibility. It seems to sort of arch the back a bit as well. But certainly when you look at the image, which I'll show, to me, the A does look like a person sort of doing some sort of upward stretch. So I think it works. I think you could also say there are these images of the god Osiris in which he's sort of standing different. Osiris has several different postures. Some is just standing, a standing corpse. There's a lying corpse. There's a corpse with the arms crossed, arms outstretched. In one of these rituals is the sign of Osiris slain and the sign of Osiris risen. similar ideas, probably where it comes from, I would have thought, one way or another. To make things a little bit more complicated, they don't give it all away, right? Because then they say, the master says in the text, without knowing the elements, the tact verse, as it says, as situated in the body, and all letters as they are situated in the body, one cannot be liberated. So you have to know this stuff, but maybe the body already knows it, right? All of these I'll teach you as they are written, as they look. Some have the shape of parts of the body, and some have the shape of the whole body arranged in particular ways. So it's telling you the secret there. As I say, there's another description of it which doesn't quite add up. It doesn't, you know. There's a hidden bit, but I'm not gonna tell you that bit. I'm gonna keep some of it back. But basically, that posture of the formless letter A. This is core. That's probably all you need to know, right? Is the standing pose. Ideally, it's all there. One thing to notice is the visual aspect that matters. Something that may have sort of been forgotten with it, even within Shaivism, in a way, that it's all about image and the visual thing that you can see in someone else or they can see in you, rather than the sounds that people make. So people think of mantra as being all about sound, and they forgot that there's also a sound is a kind of representation of an image of some sort. I say there's more and more details into this that I could go, but probably as much as you reasonably can talk about in this thing. I just wanted to put that before you. You've got a simple posture there that it's the universal, that you can work with it, but and it's worth reflecting upon this combination of male and female as well as in the sex act itself, which is related to a particular shape and postures and all the rest. So we can understand now we're talking about the theater of Tantra, if you like, the visual image aspect of a Tantra that is so similar to stuff that you find within the Egyptian tradition, which in the book I shall give some more examples of them. So there's a thought. Obviously, people are going to talk about and think about other letters then. Famously in Western esotericism, we blather on about kind of languages we don't always understand that well, like Hebrew, how somehow the Hebrew alphabet, which again begins with Aleph, and the mysteries of the letter Aleph. Right? Well, there you go. There's a whole mystery just there. Perhaps the whole of all esotericism there is inherent just in the first letter, which is said to represent a bodily posture as well, strangely enough. But it's also a spark. The Aleph, the first letter of the alphabet, in all of these alphabets, is like the spark. It's like the primal sound of the universe that sets all the other things off. And once you know that principle, it's like you can either memorize all of these theorems of Euclid or whatever, or you could just understand the method that you can engage in and reconstruct the entire system from the first formula. Once you know it, the deep mind will kind of work it out. As it happens, I suppose you'd be wondering whether the letter Aleph, the first letter of the Egyptian syllabary, is the same. It's Aleph. It's usually said to be Aleph. Nobody knows this for absolute certain, but most people assume it's the case. And the letter Aleph in the Egyptian tongue is said to is drawn in the form of a vulture, of a bird, a female bird, the vulture. And I would say it has the same sort of feel to it, really, as the other kind of versions. The vulture in Egyptian mythology incorporates all sorts of speculations about the vulture itself, encapsulates everything to do with motherhood. Again, it brings us back to motherhood, to sex, reproduction, straight away with the first letter of the alphabet, which makes sense. It's because it's going to give birth to all the others. So it's birthing and nurturing. Interestingly, too, in an Egyptian text that's recently come to light called the Book of Thoth, not to be confused with the later, because it became a legendary book, and now they've actually discovered the book. So it gave its name to the Western version of the tarot, but then they found the actual Book of Thoth written in an Egyptian language. And in this Book of Thoth, it talks about 42 images of the vulture. It's funny, we mentioned the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the meaning of life. What is the meaning of life? The meaning of life is 42. And why that number? These are synchronicities, aren't they? I don't know. There are actually in the Book of Thoth 42 images of the vulture as mysterious images for meditation. So there you go. Wow. All of these things, the pieces are slotting into place, I would say, much just the same way as the images of the tarot slot into place. That a mystery school in the ancient world used these images of forms of the letter Aleph, which has 42 different tableaus or images connected with it, as a form of Gnostic meditation on the meaning of life. Isn't that amazing? So an image of the vulture, the Aleph, was obviously pretty special and crucial to the whole process that we're talking about of emanation. I recommend Robert Plimmer's book, which deals with this in more detail, known as The Chamber of Darkness. As in the group that I work with, Morgan Witches, we also now use this series of the 42 vultures and their kin as a meditational device on meaning. Finally, then, another synchronicity to end with. In Coptic Christianity, so Coptic Egyptian Christianity, this is the religion that kind of took over or from the pharaonic religion, but kept many of its elements. They changed the alphabet. They have another alphabet. They use a different alphabet, the Greek alphabet. So they have the letter Aleph as well, or Alpha, of course, in the Greek form. But essentially, it's the same vibe. I think you would say. They didn't have quite enough letters in the Greek language to represent all the different sounds that you might need in the Egyptian language, so they used a couple of other ones, some hieroglyphs, in fact, in sort of some form or other to fill the spaces. But if you look at the Coptic alphabet in the form called Uncial, right? Well, all right, Uncial apparently means big letters, right? For sticking on the wall and stuff, with carving on the wall. So they have a particular form that's maybe they just suit being written, the papyrus, the paper, they're easy to mark without getting all scratchy or something like that, which is often the way. So these letters are obscure, but the strange thing is, I'll leave you with this, If you look at the Coptic letter Aleph, it looks very like a vulture. Anyway, Senepti, this means, health and blessings, and see you next time.